All right. So, welcome everyone. Firstly, I'm so thankful to have all of you join today. I'm elated and encouraged by your willingness to participate in this discussion about the work of Bridge C14 with regards to the support that we are providing for those with lived experience with medical assistance in dying. There will be an opportunity to ask questions, clarify information, or just provide some comments at the end. Feel free to use the chat option, type your questions or comments in that, and then at the end we'll kind of go through and just make sure that everybody has got their questions answered, their concerns addressed, and whatnot. So my objectives today, essentially, I want to look at how MAiD is shaping end-of-life care, discuss the psychosocial issues that can create some challenges during the MAiD journey, explore some of the grief aspects related to MAiD and some resources that would be available, but also the various challenges in terms of accessing support, and then provide an overview of the work that Bridge C14 is doing to support those with this lived experience. So a little bit about who I am. I'm Lauren Clark. I am a social worker by profession. I work both on an inpatient medicine unit at the Ottawa Hospital, and I'm also a member of our MAiD program there. In addition to this, I'm the volunteer president and CEO of Bridge C14, which is a role I'll discuss more in detail later on in the presentation. I'm truly passionate about and believe deeply in MAiD, as I feel that it's the most individual centered or self directed approach to end of life. I'm inspired by the individuals I meet in witnessing love and devotion in trying times and through the resiliency and strength that they exude in the face of opposition. I want people to understand the courage it takes for someone to request MAiD and for their families and loved ones who are accompanying them on this journey. I want people to know that the decision for someone to proceed with MAiD is never easy, but it comes from a place of understanding and appreciation for quality of life at end of life. We're not all afforded the opportunity to choose how we will die or when, which MAiD allows for it, and it provides that control and dignity when everything else seems to be happening outside of our control. It takes courage to ask, courage to bear witness, and courage to continue on. I do have the following conflict of interest to disclose. My role as president and CEO of Bridge C14 is independent of my position with the Ottawa Hospital and my involvement with the Champlain Regional MAiD Network. I also receive no financial compensation for this role. So just a quick slide on what is MAiD. So MAiD is medical assistance in dying. On June 17th, 2016, it seems almost like a lifetime ago, but really not that long ago in the grand scheme of things, the federal government passed Bill C-14, which established the legalization of MAiD in Canada. So MAiD is a medical procedure. It involves the administration of medications to intentionally and safely end the life of an adult patient who meets strict legal criteria at the request of the patient. And as many of you are probably aware, Bill C7 received royal assent on March 17th, 2021, which we're very excited about, but also it will change our landscape a bit of MAiD and how we have to evolve and change some of the supports that we provide. So before we can talk about Bridge C14 and the work that we're doing to support these individuals, I think it's important that we acknowledge the psychosocial aspects of MAiD and the impact of, because the impact of the decision for someone to access MAiD has this ripple effect that extends beyond the death itself, not only for the individual, but their family, their community, and the healthcare team. And so, although considerations are made in advance to alleviate the impact of some of these psychosocial issues, they do remain an inherent part of the MAiD journey. And so they need to be explored and mitigated with the overall goal of enhancing experience for individuals and their supports. So issues could range in severity and in their impact on the facilitation of MAiD, as well as on the ability for loved ones to cope following the death. So it's important that we address the everyday issues, but also the complex needs of individuals involved. It involves having an open dialogue to understand the interpretation of suffering and the perceived burden that some feel that they're placing on their family and caregivers, as well as the ability to cope. So we need to explore how they describe this quality of life and how it relates to their suffering. Emotionally, we have to explore fears, anxieties, this sense of a loss of control. Socially, we want to explore concepts around being a burden to family or shame, feelings of isolation. It also means looking at the challenging dynamics within an individual support system, whether that be formal or informal, particularly where there's maybe a disagreement or a disapproval regarding the individual's decision to proceed with MAiD, or maybe when individuals request not to inform their family members or have them remain out of the room during the provision. So we want to encourage support discussions between the individual, their caregivers, to share some of these fears, comfort each other, and broker some additional supports that may reduce this caregiver burden or perceived caregiver burden. Culturally, as a society, we don't talk about death. It isn't something that we like to talk about, that people are comfortable talking about, but I think it's so important. And so sometimes the cultural beliefs about maybe the appropriate role of family members, how to interact with healthcare providers, even perhaps how medical treatments or advanced directives are perceived, and perhaps even the use of alternative therapies may impact the provision of care and therefore affect the end of life decision making. Spiritually, there may be distress stemming from cultural, religious, faith based, or spiritual groups that disagree with the principles of MAiD. So it's important for us to get insight into how values and beliefs interface with this decision to choose MAiD. Is this an ethical or moral dilemma for someone? Existentially, we want to look at that lack of meaning or purpose, perhaps it's feelings of hopelessness, the why me's. We want to look at the distress that's related to some of the fears, or maybe it's anger or regrets, or what life's meaning and purpose really is for that person. So, this is often intertwined with spiritual beliefs and how someone maybe should go through the dying process, the afterlife. And this is typically shaped by the cultural background and personal experience or beliefs. So, let's look at this a little bit more closely. When we think about MAiD, there are certain things that I think it's important to consider. Certainly, this isn't the most comprehensive list. There are so many complexities and intricacies involved with MAiD, but these are some of the things I want to highlight today. When individuals are going through this journey, whether it's someone who has requested MAiD for themselves or for a family member who may be going on this journey with them. Navigation of the system is often the most challenging for individuals and their families. It creates anxiety and stress. So, having a general knowledge of MAiD or how the process works and a good understanding of how to make contact with the MAiD program in your area can make all the difference. It helps to alleviate some of that stress that is on these individuals to have to figure this all out themselves. So, the more information we have, the easier it is to process. In terms of individual specific wishes, well, for individuals who are requesting MAiD, it's important that we approach this journey from a holistic framework. And I'm a firm believer that we need to look at things beyond just medical aspects, but they're, again, integrating all of those psychosocial issues that may come up. And how does that provide a framework for the support that's required? So we want to understand the reasons why someone may seek MAiD from whatever perspective we're coming in at, or whatever our scope of practice perhaps is. So we want to think through perhaps some potential problems in advance, which would allow these individuals to put some protective measures in place. We want to make sure that there's a good understanding of options and that individuals are connected with appropriate supports for their current needs. Identifying things that also provide the individual meaning, comfort, and peace on the day of, in advance of that MAiD procedure for the day of, are so important. We want this to be about them. We want to also seek some rationale for these needs or requests. Maybe they're coming from a cultural aspect, a spiritual aspect. Perhaps it's socially things that they need to have in place for them to feel that this is the best decision or that they are at peace with this decision. So sometimes requests made by individuals, maybe it's to have it completed on a certain day or at a certain time or a particular day of the year. Maybe it's to have the MAiD procedure done as quickly as possible, which isn't always feasible, but it's important to understand where that's coming from. It could also be having music playing, flowers in a room, a reading done, a video, someone on video that couldn't be there in person. We know with COVID that it has changed the landscape of how MAiD provisions are completed and that there are limitations. And so it's making sure that we have all of the steps in place and all of the pieces of the puzzle put together. We want to make sure that they are also aware of all of the arrangements that have been confirmed and want to give as much advance notice as possible to, again, decrease that anxiety that may be going on. In terms of identifying the status of an individual support system, we want to establish an understanding of the roles and dynamics within the support system that could affect the overall MAiD experience. This means inquiring about those who have been involved in the care and those that may be present on the day of. We want to make note of the relationship of these individuals to that person, as well as gauging the level of support for or against the individual's decision to proceed with MAiD. People may identify certain people in their lives who have a reluctance to accept the decision. We want to make sure that, that we provide a space and maximize the opportunity for positive exchanges to promote the feelings of peace and talk about the differences in a respectful manner to ease the grief for all involved. Because disagreements about the decision have actually been found to increase the complicated grief afterwards. But when people are able to have a safe place to be able to have these conversations in advance, it helps to reduce that stress or distress when it comes to the grief process after. But we have to be cognizant that even in situations where an individual's supports may be involved in accepting of the decision to proceed with MAiD, the family caregiver or family members or caregivers may actually feel less prepared than the individual. They may struggle to accept the reality of the situation. They may have difficulty managing the distress of all of this while still trying to remain as involved as possible in providing maybe support or assistance at end of life. So they struggle sometimes also with how to communicate that feeling to others, particularly with those who may not be as understanding or those who lack maybe an appreciation for MAiD. For those supporting individuals through the journey, people may look to you for guidance on how to talk to others about this, what to say, how much to disclose. They may also ask you to explain to others about things they should expect. What does that look like? What can we anticipate? Families are often placed in a position where they're required to teach others about MAiD rather than receiving the immediate support that they seek to address their own needs. So this may involve challenging opponents through justification or validation of their loved one's rationale. Maybe it's, something that we need to explore the perception of stigma or review strategies on managing. They also have to work through their own grief and manage their own lives. Or they want to protect the individual from additional stress, so they take all these things on themselves. We want to make sure that we're providing reliable information, demonstrating empathy, so acknowledging these emotions, listening, providing the emotional support, eliciting questions. Feeling prepared has absolutely been found to positively affect the bereavement outcomes for families. So the better prepared someone is, the easier it is to process the grief after. It doesn't lessen the grief, but people have provided feedback that it helps them to be prepared for that grief journey post-MAiD. In the absence of family or supports, offering the individuals the opportunity to discuss reasons for the absence of family members or loved ones. Perhaps there's a history of abuse or neglect, conflict, geographical challenges. How that impacts their dying experience is really critical. When we look at the cultural or faith-based, religious or spiritual aspects of an individual's life, there's tremendous variation among families and cultures in how they express grief and how they say goodbye. Existential and spiritual attitudes and values are often shaped by the cultural background, the personal experience, or individual beliefs. This may also differ from the healthcare team. So it's important for that group to be cognizant of this and to ensure that they have a good understanding of where this fits in an individual's life. Also, many faith-based groups and institutions do not support MAiD, which may cause distress for individuals and families. So they may perhaps express a reluctance to discuss this situation with faith leaders or request their participation in the MAiD journey because they fear judgment or pushback. And so we want to make sure that if someone wants to involve their spiritual or faith-based or religious group, that we help to make those arrangements to facilitate that request, but also providing space and time for specific spiritual practices or rituals to take place is also very important. Transferring from healthcare facilities who claim a form of conscientious objection can be very stressful. It, what we need to ensure is that the goal of that transition or transfer is to provide a seamless approach. So we want to make sure that transportation arrangements are made, that there's comfort and the individual and the family during the transfer, and to talk about that experience was like, recognizing that it is often one of the most challenging, in particular when we get to the day of. I think it's really critical that we talk about anticipatory and disenfranchised grief when it comes to MAiD. So anticipatory grief is experienced not only by in the individual themselves, but also their loved ones. And it's different than the grief that follows a death. It can carry many of the symptoms, though, of regular grief and what we would imagine to be, sadness and anger and isolation or depression. So these complicated emotions are often coupled with the exhaustion that comes with the illness or with being a caregiver. We're aware with MAiD of this looming death and accepting it will come, but that can also bring an overwhelming anxiety, or some describe it as a dread of that day of. They're also grieving the loss of someone's abilities and their independence, loss of perhaps their hope or future dreams, loss of stability and security, loss of identity, the individual's identity, but also our own. And these countless losses are compounding on one another. So providing resource information in advance of the death and naming grief for what it is helps individuals to process this much better. Remind them that it takes courage to request MAiD and also to stand by someone's side throughout the journey. You want to encourage people to ask lots of questions and describe what they're experiencing with their support system or with a healthcare professional. Disenfranchised grief is defined by Ken Duca, who's a well-known grief researcher, as grief that persons experience when they incur a loss that is not or cannot be openly acknowledged, socially sanctioned, or publicly mourned. So it's a relative and a subjective experience. So you and I may experience the same loss. And in your social situation among your friends in your community, the loss is openly acknowledged, it's publicly mourned. But perhaps in my social situation or among my friends and community, it's not. So though we've experienced the same loss, for me, it will be a disenfranchised experience, but for you, it will not be. So for this reason, examples of disenfranchised grief can range dramatically from person to person and community to community. So again, when we think about the importance of support, you can see why individuals, their loved ones, their families need access to support and information. Again, we have to acknowledge the grief and bereavement access or aspects of MAiD, which is key. I think it differs, and many describe it as very different than other grief experiences or other losses that they've gone through. And so we need to be cognizant of that. The shared experience with others who understand and appreciate the grief associated with this type of loss absolutely has positive benefits. Services are available, but they're often limited in many respects. And so, you know, we're fortunate in Canada, we have Dying with Dignity, who's a national group organization which is focused a lot on advocacy work, which is important as we move and drive MAiD into the conversations. Bridge C14 is there. We have, it's a national, again, national organization, but more focused on building the connections for those with lived experience on a peer-to-peer level. We'll talk about that in detail soon. And other resources may be available in other parts of the province or the country, but sometimes the ability of individuals to actually seek out support may be limited for those. Maybe they can't access private counseling services. Maybe their geographic location, there isn't something available to them. Or there's a fear of stigmatization, or the lack of appreciation or knowledge of MAiD and opposition or conscientious objection to MAiD, which can make things more difficult. So providing access to education and ongoing support to the community is imperative. So this is why, you know, I set up this session today is to get the information out there. And I would encourage all of you at any point in time is to always continue to expand your knowledge around MAiD and the various aspects. It will help immensely as you support those around you. So that brings me to, who is Bridge C14? So again, we're a national nonprofit organization. We were founded by Jan Ditchfield in November 2017. And a little background, Jan and I actually were asked to speak at a conference together in March 2017. And we had never met one another. She had a lived experience with MAiD. And I remember her sitting in my office at work and she shared her story. And with my experience with being part of our MAiD program, I had always known that there were the access to support or resources was limited. Very, you know, very early on, there really wasn't much available. And so Jan introduced this idea of wanting to start a nonprofit organization based on that personal experience with MAiD. I jumped on board and said, sign me up, recognizing that we had a true gap in terms of accessing MAiD specific supports to those across the country. The organization was launched in November 2017, and I joined the founding board of directors. I took over as president and CEO in June of 2019 when the other board members stepped away due to personal and work commitments. This was something that was so passionate about continuing on that I felt the need to take the organization on myself, and it's grown and evolved over time. We are dedicated to providing meaningful connections of support for families and loved ones throughout all stages of assisted death. And we are absolutely committed to creating a culture where dignity, choice, and grief are honored and valued. So what do we do? Well, we help to change that conversation to one which honors and respects the family's dignity and individual choice. We want to advance and promote this community of compassion. And I think community is really what we want to build, is a community. We want to make sure that there's care and comfort throughout the journey and facilitate that access to information about MAiD. Again, there are numerous things that people can tap into, you know, journal articles or Dying with Dignity. There's such a wealth of resource information, but sometimes finding that information can be overwhelming as well. And so we provide information in terms of it's broken down into various groups and topics so that someone can easily come and find that information and go from there. We want that community to help reduce the feelings of isolation, and again, bridging the gap, hence the name Bridge C14, between procedure and compassion. We want to allow the opportunities to enhance peer support with others who have lived experience. And I think peer support is so important that, having that peer to peer connection is critical when helping someone throughout the journey, and creating a community of practice for volunteers and professionals as well. I think that's really important. Some of the work sometimes that we do can be quite isolating in many respects. So having that community of practice that you can join and feel safe and supported in your experience is so we want to, it helps to advance what we do. And I think it creates a home and a safe place to be able to share openly. So, how do we do all of this? Like I said, when I took over the board as president and CEO, a lot of what my vision was to engage with people across the country to see what is needed. COVID threw a wrench in terms of some of the planning, but it didn't stop us from building a stronger community, a stronger voice, and a stronger place of support. So we have a MAiD resource center on our website. You can always log on, check out what we've got in our resource section. This is continuing to be updated as new information comes out. We have newsletter updates. I typically like to send out a newsletter at least once or twice a year, hopefully more often as the conversation changes and things evolve. We have podcasts on our website that you can take a listen to. And that's one of the things that I'd like to grow as well. So if anyone is ever interested in being interviewed on a podcast, let me know. Every perspective counts. The peer-to-peer connections is probably the bulk of what we do. Sometimes individuals who aren't on, let's say, social media, who aren't as comfortable maybe signing up for a Zoom session, may just want to connect one-on-one with someone. They are welcome to email me and say, I'd like to talk to somebody about that, what I'm struggling with, or what's going on for me. And I can put them in touch with someone with that lived experience. There's access to grief and bereavement support groups. Most of these are now done online. And so this is one of the things that, again, has had to shift because of COVID. But there are grief and bereavement support groups. And my hope is to have, individuals be able to access this no matter where they live in some capacity, whether that's in person, if we get back to that, or online. And so one of the things that the organization is going to also be introducing soon is sort of an ongoing drop-in grief and bereavement group, just like our family meetups, which used to happen in person in coffee shops and whatnot, not a formal group, but something where someone can drop in when they need to on a scheduled day and say, here I am, this is what's going on. We do have partnerships with outside individuals and organizations who run more formal groups. Sometimes they are, 5 sessions or 10 sessions. But if someone is going through this journey and happens to miss the start date, well, where do they fit? And so that's one of the goals of the organization, is to start that ongoing drop-in grief group. We have community forums on our website. This is an area that certainly I'm going to be focusing more attention on. So again, for those who maybe aren't in one of our Facebook support groups, that they can actually access that kind of question and answer perspective from a closed membership only group on our website. The Facebook support groups I do want to talk about. We have one that is dedicated solely to families and loved ones with that lived experience. And then we have another one which is for professionals or volunteers, those with sort of that or organizations who want to join that community of practice, so they can connect with others who are also doing this work. Again, the partnerships with outside agencies is how we're growing our brand. And so, as I noted earlier in the presentation, there are groups that are running in certain communities that are doing this solely on their own. And so what Bridge C14 can do is partner with those organizations and say, well, we're here to also help to get the word out there. We don't step on toes. We don't direct how you do the work that you do. As long as it fits with the values and mission of the organization, partnerships are a good way of growing and developing on all fronts. And then we have postcards that are available. These are a hard copy postcard that I can send out to you, that you can give to others who are going through this, whether you're a professional or if you're someone who knows of others who are perhaps going through this journey themselves on a personal level. You can help to provide that information to them, and then they're able to access our supports as needed when needed. Where can you find more information? Again, our website is a really good place to start. You can sign up and subscribe. If you do subscribe on our website, you will have full access to our newsletters that get sent out. And you can also then sign up for our community forums that are online. Email address. I love the emails I receive. Sometimes they're really challenging questions and it makes me ponder. And I want to make sure that you have access to the information or to the support that you're requiring. And again, our Facebook groups, we have a main Bridge C14 page, but we also then have the 2 closed groups that there are certain questions that need to be answered in order to join those. And it's a good place to share openly, again, with those with lived experience, to get that connection that people need when they're struggling, when they want to process what's going on, when they need to reflect on what has happened to them or to their loved one, and what this all means to them. So I'm going to turn these slides off and open up the chat room. Give me one moment here. Are there any questions that have come up or comments that anyone has? Again, I can turn off the recording if you aren't comfortable sharing with others, or just maybe for those who weren't aware of our organization. How did you find us today? And was this information was it helpful to you in terms of either the work that you're doing or in your own journey? Yep, I see a hand up. Nikki?
Hi, Lauren. My name's Nikki. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for organizing this. My father had a medically assisted death in February of 2019. I wish I had known about you. I walked that path very much alone. And I've got in touch with you through Tekla at MAiD House, who I found through the doctor who actually assisted my father, because I have a desire now to help people get the support that you are offering. And I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing because it's so valuable. There are these huge gaps, and it just doesn't need to be that way. So I've just come because I'd like to be a part of the conversation and a part of educating people further. You touched on the idea of stigma, and there definitely is a lot of stigma to it. In fact, one of the things that helped my father through his journey was suicide did come up, which I think is not uncommon. And knowing that a doctor was there and that this was now a legal procedure really helped him come to terms with the end of his journey. So I'm a big proponent of what you're doing, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you, because it's invaluable. So
Thank you for sharing and for joining us today. And I think we need allies in this, right? And I think that's so important. And again, that understanding and appreciation for the challenges and the complexities, that's what's needed. And people need to find that safe and supportive place where they can turn to. I'm sorry that you didn't have us sooner. We're here now, and so and that's my goal is, and I think the work that we do with regards to MAiD is so important to get that conversation rolling. And certainly it's out in the media now. People are talking more about medical assistance in dying, and we want to, make sure that people have the knowledge base or the resources that they can tap into when they feel that they're doing this all by themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Anyone else have questions, thoughts that came up? Is this new information, or is this information that I know we're kind of coming all in with different walks of life? Oh, I see a hand up. Is it Deanna?
Hi.
Hello.
Similarly, my grandmother passed away using MAiD last year actually. And so I thought it was kind of a sign when I saw that this was also booked today. But I'm just wondering if there's any resources that you can give if I wanted to join something to help support family members, because again, like, it's such a unique experience going through it with the anticipation and having it be planned out and those things, and I didn't really feel like there was anything. I couldn't find anything to support me during that time, and I would like to do that.
Well, thank you for joining us today, and maybe it is a sign that, like you said, it's been a year, and so welcome. And what I think a lot of our members say is that opportunity to give back and to walk that journey with someone who is at the beginning stages is so important. So if you want to send me an email with your information, again, I receive a number of emails each week from people who are saying, where do I go? Where do I go to from here? Where can I seek out support? How can I get in touch with someone who knows what I'm talking about? And so I can put you in touch with someone. But we also have, our board of directors. We are looking for growth in terms of our board of directors, and connecting on a more global level in terms of work across the country. And I think it's important that we tap into the perspectives of everyone, and not only just from a professional standpoint, but I think the family experience is so key, whichever role you play in a family. And so, there are times where we need to expand, or that I'm looking to others for that expertise. I myself have professional experience, but I don't have personal experience. And I think the personal experience is so important, and the stories that each one carries with you, and how that experience sort of transpired, and what that looked like, and the support that you still need. For yourself, being a year out, it will look very different. The landscape looks different now than it probably did early on, but perhaps things also are the same. And maybe there's things that you can chat with somebody else in terms of what was that like for them, and normalizing. I think it's normalizing the grief experience. That's what people really are seeking, and saying, is what I'm going through, is what I'm thinking and feeling, is this normal?
Yeah, just having somebody be able to say, I relate to you on that, or I went through the same thing, because not very many people have gone through it, and it is so unique. And yeah, it's definitely a different experience. So I just wanted to be able to maybe help support. So how do I find your email to send you
on? So Bridge C14 org at gmail.com.
Thank you.
And we're always looking to build on those personal experiences, because, like you said, it's just to relate on a different level with someone, from others who may not understand or even know what any of this is like. And it's a very unique. There are very unique challenges.
I feel like people are like, oh, I understand what it's like to lose somebody, but to lose somebody this way, it feels like you're very alone in that sense, because nobody really gets it.
That isolation is often the word that people use. It's this isolation in our grief. And so that's where Bridge C14, we want to help provide those connections. If you're on Facebook, I would encourage you to join our Facebook group as well, because that is a place where people do share those experiences wherever they're at on the journey. And sometimes it's immediately following a death, but it's also sometimes it's a few years down the road thinking, okay, I'm now at a new place. And I think COVID has brought a lot of challenges, not only for everyone, but I think in terms of that grief journey for individuals and how to seek out that support. And we're always looking for individuals who want to participate in a type of grief group or family meetups. It was easier pre-COVID when we had, people would say, I've set up a time and a space in a coffee shop, let's get some people together and we can just meet and we can talk about MAiD, or we could talk about the weather. We're not forced to sort of have these conversations if we're not comfortable, but it again is an opportunity to meet and connect. And so how do we do that? And perhaps there is a role here that we can get something off the ground. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Hi, Lauren.
Hello.
My name is Nancy, and I'm a police officer with Peel Regional Police. I work in our organizational wellness unit, and I have two coworkers that are also on this session. So first and foremost, I just want to really thank you for hosting this. I was not myself very knowledgeable, and I'm still learning so much about MAiD, but it touched our police family last year. So one of our members, Mike Neal, a police officer here in Peel, decided to, use MAiD and end his life with dignity and everything. And his dad, I think his grandfather and his father both had Huntington's disease. And he as well had it and began suffering through all of that. He knew what the ending looked like and chose to go down this path. And we were all very supportive, but not very aware of all what was involved. And he also struggled with being an organ donor and wanting to die at home. And it's my understanding, and I could be wrong, Lauren, but he was the first person to actually do this, to be able to die at home and have his organs donated. And it was such an amazing thing, knowing Mike the way we all knew him and how he wanted to continue giving. Like, it's just such a touching story. They did a big article in the Toronto Star, and I know I'm talking far too much for everybody here, but it was something that affected a large portion of our service. And I just really wanted to jump on here to learn more and perhaps, pass it along to anybody else, because it's a different family, like the other ladies were speaking, but it's still a family, and we were all very affected by it. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you for sharing. And I think that's, when we talk about families and loved ones, and it's not just blood relations, right? And that story alone shows that again, that ripple effect, it touches everyone and in different ways. And so how do we connect in those various ways and provide support that extends to everyone involved? And you don't have to be at the bedside to understand what that what that grief journey can look like, and we experience it in our own ways. And certainly it sounds like he was a pioneer in many ways in terms of championing that the MAiD provision in the community, while also still staying true to what he wanted to do with the organ donation. And it's stories like this that I think it makes us step back a bit and reflect on things. And I think that's where that community, where we can all engage with one another and share this, because it really, what we take home with us, whether it's on our personal note or in our own professional lives, what we take home with us can sort of resonate. And we want to make sure that everyone feels that support, no matter what capacity, and that people know that we're there any step of the way, and they can come in and share openly, and it doesn't have to be a direct family member. It can be part of their own community. So thank you for sharing that, and welcome to your other two colleagues as well, because we know that this is so important. It's an important conversation to have, and it's still very much, MAiD is still very much in its infancy. And so these are conversations that are important because it's still so new. there isn't a lot known, and sometimes we're not comfortable talking about it. And I've always said I'm someone who will stand on top of a building and shout out that I'm part of this, but not everybody is, even those who do this work. And so, having that place to come, and sometimes I want to share my story, but I want to do it anonymously, perhaps, just for either safety or personal reasons. So how do I do that? And those kind of, emails I get, I empathize that this is what we're here for. You don't have to out yourself, for lack of a better term, if you don't want to. Again, it's a safe community to be a part of. Oh, and I see from Tekla that you can do tissue donations from home, the Trillium Gift of Life, certainly in Ontario, has good information on their website. Thank you for that. But again, organ donations is new, and it again is an extra layer of complexity on top of already a very complicated process in many ways. And that's why that navigation of the process and that journey is so important, that we recognize that, and all that's, the intricacies that go along with that navigating, and who's there and who needs the information and what does that information look like. Some people will say, I don't want a lot of information, I just want such and such questions answered. And others say, give me all of the information I need to soak this in. I need everything in terms of being able to process. Again, those are individual choices, and what you get out of the experience is what you want to, and what you take home with you is what you want to. But knowing that there is a place to land if you do need that direct support. It's really important. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions? Again, I want to thank all of you for joining in today. I think this is, again, it's an important discussion to have. I'm happy that we were able to do this today, that we could, start to tease out some of this, and again, share the information. Word of mouth is how this organization grows and will continue to grow and evolve. And those, personal experiences that you have are what's going to help develop our programming more so. We want to make sure that Bridge C14 captures everyone's, what everyone wants or what everyone is needing. And so I'm always open to hearing from others about, ideas and whatnot. Okay. Oh, hello, June.
Hello, Lauren. It's so good to see you in person. Just wanted to highlight, you've mentioned Dying with Dignity being such a good resource as well. And I've really appreciated your Bridge C14 resource. So many people on this call may not know that there's a national office for Dying with Dignity that has lots of resources and webinars, but also most major cities across Canada have a Dying with Dignity chapter. And we do education, we link up with families who need support, and we provide virtual witnessing. So if you're not aware of the Dying with Dignity chapter in your province, please connect with them.
Thank you. And I think both of the organizations do very good work, and I'm a little biased when I say that as well. But I think there's a lot of overlap in what the organizations do, but there's also very separate roles that each group plays as well. And I think it's a resource that we can share openly. I think there's a lot of complementary aspects to both. And sometimes people don't need what we provide, but would really benefit from what Dying with Dignity provides, and vice versa. So thank you for highlighting that. And absolutely, it's a great resource to go to. And hopefully we can create some more, again, this being a partnership. And I'm all about sharing the wealth and the experience. I don't think any one organization can do this on their own, or any one individual. Again, it's that conversation in the community of the lived experience, but also in practice. Oh, yes, Nikki.
Sorry, just unmuting myself. So how do doctors navigate this information as well? Are they being educated on, because it wasn't until I actually asked my father's GP, like after my dad was basically begging to be set free, and 3 years of hearing him suffering and asking, just saying, I want to die, I want to die. And then finally saying, please, what can we do for him? Like it wasn't a conversation. There was no sort of end of life, it seemed, knowledge, even from the doctor's end of this service. So I'm just wondering how the doctors are being educated and how, their end of life language can be improved so that people even know it's an option.
I think based on sort of my professional experience in this, I think that conversation has certainly evolved over time. Is it perfect? No. Are we getting there? I would like to think we are. I know a lot of institutions are now engaging residents or physicians in terms of how to have these conversations, focusing a lot on those end of life and those serious illness conversations that I think are so important. Not everyone can name MAiD for what it is, right? And I still remember somebody saying, oh, so you clean. Well, no, that's not what MAiD is. But again, it's an acronym that can hold many things for many people. And so how do we, have those important discussions, and I think build up comfort level? Well, some in the medical profession are conscientious objectors, which is fine. And certainly we're not going to sway them in any way. And it's not to say that that's wrong or goes against what we believe in. So sometimes it's that sort of not always knowing how to navigate that themselves. I think there's more out there. I think there's more opportunities for growth and education for them. CAMAP is a significant resource. And I think a lot of MAiD assessors and providers, so it's CAMAP. It's a group where the medical group joins and they have an open forum. They talk about some of the complications that they experience, or sort of some of those situations that are more challenging and whatnot, just to get that conversation rolling. We hope that it's a conversation that continues to evolve and we see it more in education programs. In our area, we go out and we educate different various groups, whether that be family physicians, perhaps it's at a hospital, just to get the word out there.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's just navigating how to have that conversation. But I think with BLC7 now being more in the news and at the forefront, I'd like to think people are looking into this more, and are more open to having that, or at least knowing where to direct individuals to if they're not comfortable. And that's part of the guidelines as well, is that they need to be able to, if someone is a conscientious objector, let's say, they need to make an effective referral. And so that's where knowing what's available in your community is so important. But again, starting that conversation and naming MAiD for what it is and what you're actually asking for, it's sometimes easier said than done. But I'd like to think from the time I started with this almost 5 years ago, it has grown. But again, it's a work in progress for sure. And it's tough when I hear that that's sort of the experience that you had, and trying to, sort of knock at the door and say, what is available, what is available, what is available.
Yeah. I mean, it was just once I learned more, I was like, wow, shouldn't you know this? And yeah, it was shocking. Once it did come up, I was like, oh my God, like we should have talked about this 3 years ago. And now I've understood, because I'm studying actually to become a death doula, which this journey inspired me there, that doctors they can't even bill OHIP to have an end of life conversation. I mean, it's just not in our system, because our system is so much based on keep these people alive at whatever cost for as long as possible, when in fact, so many people don't want that.
And again, I think that's changing. I think it also depends on where you reside as well. And sometimes it's it's like you being a family member to bring it up in a conversation,
Yeah.
and sort of saying there must be more. There's something, feels like we need more, and I always would encourage you then to sort of challenge, but also it's on also in terms of how you now spread that word. And I think that's, and June is right here. There's an ethical issue, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
And
And most people say,
broaches-
oh, suicide. And I'm like, well, I changed, because at first I was talking, I went in my language changed, because 2 years ago I was saying a medically assisted suicide. And then I was like, but it's not that, suicide has such a negative
connotation.
yeah. And so I was like, no, this is just, freeing somebody from suffering.
Yeah. And it's, who broaches the conversation, or how does that conversation evolve, right? And how is this presented as an option? And I think there is sometimes this fear around counseling, and certainly there's a line drawn where how we introduce that idea or concept. And again, it's
A challenge.
challenging.
Yeah. Because I could see a doctor feeling like, oh, I don't really want to suggest you essentially kill yourself, and there not be any sort of repercussions, whether it's from that person or family members or even the law at, the most intense cases. So I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly it's a gray zone.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes as a society, we like things to be very black and white. But I think MAiD falls in the gray. And I think it really takes sometimes those family members who have done the research, but how do you get that information to do the research? What's that starting point? So I hope that, for others who are now going and starting this journey themselves, that they have more information than perhaps those who 2, 3, 4 years ago, where they were at. And I think it's all part of the dialogue, and getting people comfortable. It's legal. And I think, we need to be able to talk about it. But again, staying within our scope of practice is also, that's where the challenges lie.
Tricky. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So thank you to those who are sharing on the side here and the resources. Absolutely. Bill C7, Dying with Dignity, has the ins and outs on Bill C7. And I think if you're looking for more information in terms of kind of teasing out what Bill C7 means and what that's going to do to change MAiD and the conversations we have, certainly Dying with Dignity, I direct everyone to there, because that information is so critical, and where we move forward to, when we're looking at MAiD and the provisions and who has access, and whatnot, because it is going to change things for sure. Well, again, thank you to everyone for joining today. Let's keep the conversation going. Know that I'm here, and I'm open, and certainly want to keep the discussions happening, more ideas coming in terms of what we can do to help support, and again, in building some partnerships in that community. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and hope to be in touch soon. Bye.
Thank you, Lauren. Bye.
Thank you.